Special segment here is the E9 podcast final 2 episode review of Full Swing, episodes 7 and 8, where we really, I think, get a very inside look, Josh, at the Ryder Cup. Something that we probably haven't seen in the past in terms of access. Some raw emotions on display. Let's start with episode 7. This one starts off with Zach Johnson starting to notify Team USA of who's going to be on the team. What'd you think of the intros in terms of how these players reacted? I mean, Spieth didn't even pick up the phone.
It just confirms to me what you said a few weeks ago, that there was really no drama in this at all, that these dudes knew, because if you're waiting on bated breath like Keegan was, you're staring at your phone waiting for the ring, and that's not happening. They obviously knew that he was going to be calling on that day. So I'm a little bit wary of this whole thing just being staged. That said, there was a little bit of a cliffhanger from episode 6 to episode 7. And my daughter was on, I think you heard that a couple of weeks ago. She did a little guest spot and she talked about
your proposed arranged marriage.
Yeah, that was just in case, things don't work out. I love you and your wife, but life happens. Anyway,
I'd love to call you dad.
Oh, anytime, son. So she was really, at the end of episode 6, she was really upset because, she didn't know what was going to happen. She wanted to know the end of the cliffhanger. Is Keegan going to make the team? Is he not? She was very upset if he wasn't going to make the team, because even she could kind of key in from episode 6 that he was probably being treated unfairly. There was something going on in kind of this boys club versus kind of Keegan on his own, a little bit outside of that inner circle. And so when I played episode 7 for her, we watched it right afterwards because she couldn't wait. She was in tears. She literally cried watching the Keegan scene with his wife there and the kid. And, I think we said this a couple of weeks ago, we all can relate to that feeling of not getting picked, whether it's at recess kickball, whether it's, that someone turning down as a partner for a club event, whatever it might be. So that moment probably resonates with a lot of people, but the stakes were so freaking high, and what it meant to Keegan, that was hard to watch. And I don't hold Zach in very high esteem, for the whole process. But I do think I think it hurt him not to give Keegan the invite, even though I don't think he did everything the right way. I think he was legitimately, afterwards he got done like that. That was one of the hardest things I've had to do. So I bought a little bit of that. The rest of it just felt kind of staged. Hey, Justin, how would you like to go to Rome? I was waiting for this call. And that stuff all seemed like a little bit, too on the nose.
Yeah, it was very convenient that when he called JT, his wife had the phone recording to get his reaction.
Sure,
she's not doing that. She's not doing that if he doesn't already know.
Right. That's such a reality TV trope. Yeah, it's like a reality TV trope. They don't acknowledge they're being recorded. They kind of all of a sudden, the camera's there, hey, what's happening. And you're right. The Jordan thing, I was changing a dirty diaper. Settle down, dude. You have 47 people around you who can change a diaper so you can take a Ryder Cup phone call. It was just a little bit gross, the whole process was. And,
I thought Brooks did himself no favors to the anti-Brooks Koepka crowd. It just sounded like he could care less.
Well, I mean, he did say, it's an honor. I'm honored. But do you think that, Brooks just hung up the phone right for that? Is hey, man, thanks. I'm honored. Click. I just think that's what happened. I don't think there's any other conversation. It's Brooks, we want you in Rome. He's oh, man, I'm honored. Click. And that was it. I think that's what happened.
Jen was hey, who was that, Brooks? Oh, it was just, I'm on the Ryder Cup.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's go back to the pool.
I thought Ricky's reaction was genuine. It seemed like he'd been as far down in the rankings as he had plummeted prior to this, 2023. That felt like it meant something to him.
Yeah, that seemed legit. And I think the season of Ricky that we saw this year, we saw a lot of Ricky. We saw his U.S. Open come apart. We saw, kind of the redemption story of him winning at the Rocket Mortgage. And so to see him make the Ryder Cup team after this whole year was kind of cool. And at the time, I don't know how you felt about that selection last year, before the Ryder Cup, because he had a terrible Ryder Cup, and they really did. And we'll talk about this later, I'm sure. Kind of mine into his concession of Fleetwood's putt on 16. His Ryder Cup was terrible. He got sick. He didn't play very well. It was just not a great Ricky Ryder Cup. So in hindsight, it seems like, well, why was he on the team? I even wrote that note, like, why was he on the team? Then you forget he had a good year. Like, he really did come back strong that year. And so it made sense. It felt good to see him get that phone call. So that was the only one I think I really enjoyed seeing. The Keegan thing was painful because you could just see it on his face, and his wife, as soon as like the cameras left, his wife just went off on Zach Johnson. Like our wives are so protective. My wife would have just blown a gasket. She would have been ready to fight everybody. And
that's a really good point though, is Keegan's reaction was so classy. Like, I don't know in that moment, because he knows what's going on, and he alludes to it later on in the episode where he says, like, listen, if I'm building a team, I'm putting JT on it too. Yeah. He handled that thing with such class and grace.
You're right. Like, and that episode 8 scene that you're talking about, where he's watching the Ryder Cup and said the same, like, that's what really frames him with class in this, because they kind of cut away from him and you don't see him again until episode 8, and then he says, like, I would put JT on there, and he's rooting for the guys, and like he's so into it, like I'm a fan for life. And I didn't dislike him at all before. I found him a little goofy. It's kind of got a weird setup, and he just kind of goes about his business a little strangely compared to most professional golfers. But man, I really am a fan now. And you're right. He came across so good.
Yep. And I think what really ticked me off the most is about Zach Johnson, and that's a theme here, is that Zach Johnson keeps pissing me off, was how he framed the decision to not pick Keegan when he tells him, we want to go in a different direction this year.
Oh, that was so bad. You're right.
Like, it couldn't have been more the same direction that you've always went. Like, that's exactly what that was. And
he just said, hey, Keegan, we're going to do what we always do. We're just going to take like the good old boys club over there, like the buddies at the country club.
We think we've got chemistry with the team, the way it's been built for the last 4 years. Thanks. Yeah. But to be like, we're going to go in a different, like, what direction's that? Like, please enlighten me.
A different direction. We taking Keegan. It'd be like, hey, we're going a different direction. You're coming with us. Absolutely. He said, it's like, it's nothing you did or didn't do. He said that line to him, and it's kind of a throwaway line when you're breaking bad news to somebody. You've probably had to give bad news to an employee or a client. It's nothing you did or didn't do. But when you actually think about it, it really wasn't anything Keegan did, because he had no chance. He didn't do or not do anything, because the mind was already made up that we're going to keep the JT and Jordan train together. And more frustratingly, they didn't really go into the Sam Burns selection at all, which is the one that's kind of criminal to me. JT made a little bit of sense, but all that said, like, nothing you did or didn't do. Well, yeah, no kidding, because this, like you said, was predestined. We're going the same direction we always have.
So let's pivot then. What are your notes on Team Europe? I mean, here's Luke Donald. Clearly, Zach Johnson almost felt like the heir apparent, right? Like, oh yeah, here I am. I'm stepping into the role that I feel as though I was entitled to and I earned. And then you've got Luke Donald, who's just, you can tell just by the tone, the way he's conducting himself, like he's just very happy to be there, very honored, very humbled, almost as though, and he says this again in the later episode. And I'm gonna butcher the quote, but it's like, we all doubt ourselves, right? And I think he didn't feel necessarily worthy of that position, but man, I thought the reaction to the European player captain picks compared to the US was just night and day.
And I do think it was very fortuitous for Team Europe that Stenson made the decision he did, because I don't think Heinrich would have been as good a captain. I don't think he would have been as thoughtful or cerebral about it. I think Heinrich's a smart guy, but Luke is uber smart. Here, the note I took, and I'm going to screw this up saying it, but the note I took is, Luke Donald appears to be a CEO type that's just really good at golf. Like, he's a world-class golfer, but he really is a CEO who happens to be really good. Whereas Zach Johnson is a world-class golfer. He's a great golfer who's trying to be CEO, but he's not. He's just not wired that way. He's just a great golfer. Like, why are we expecting great golfers to be able to think and strategically plan like a CEO? Luke Donald has that. He's a highly educated dude. All these guys are smart, but he's got a good education. Clearly, he is savvy in front of the camera and behind it. And he struck me as a guy who could run a business. And Zach Johnson struck me as a guy who was pretending he could run a business and was just a really good golfer. And he got outclassed. Yeah. He got outcoached.
Zach Johnson to me was the type of CEO or leader that read a few books on leadership, took some notes,
Yeah.
and it was trying to run that playbook, right? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I have to say this in this moment, or here's the talk track to adversity. Whereas Luke Donald was much more, like you said, cerebral, natural. Um, yeah, I just again the difference between the two teams couldn't have been. We knew it. I think what's interesting is we knew how different it was. I think after the first day of the Ryder Cup, when we were watching in real time, and now seeing it just leading up to the event, it's like if we had access to this, I would have bet every cent to my name on Team Europe.
Yeah.
Mortgage
Mike.
bets, mortgage bets, mortgage bets, mortgage bets.
Mike, I made that prediction last year when we went through the
You
teams.
did?
Like I said, this was going to be a blowout, just because we can't win over there anyway. But just because of the quality of the top 6 guys were so good. But I didn't, like you said, if I had known how effective and efficient Luke Donald was going to be as a leader, you know, and you're a leader in your business. You know, when you're a CEO, you got to do several things. And if you think about it, it's kind of very similar to being a captain of a team. You got to hire well, you got to train well, you got to have a strategic plan, and you have to retain talent. And you have to be a problem solver. You know, you have those 5 things. If you're a CEO, that's what you do. You deal in the big picture stuff. You know, other people micromanage. But that dude hired really well. He trained really well. He had a really good strategic plan. He retained the right guys, bringing Justin Rose back. And when it was time to problem solve, you know, hey, we lost a bunch of dudes to live. He problem solved. He did all the things a CEO could do. And if you look at Zach Johnson, he didn't hire very well. He certainly didn't train very well, because they were not ready for, I think it was Rappaport who said, like, you know, he quoted Mike Tyson, you know, everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face. Well, Johnson didn't have a plan for what happened when you get punched in the face, which is what a good CEO does. They problem solve. I mean, Zach's idea of problem solving, and they didn't put this in the documentary, which really infuriated me, was talking Jordan Spieth out of hitting a driver on 16 on Friday, and Spieth hit a 3-wood into the water. Where's that in Netflix? Because that is bad CEOing right there. That's micromanaging. You didn't see Luke Donald there talking his guys out of what club to hit. The whole thing was a complete disaster for Zach Johnson. And I hope to God the PGA of America is paying attention and goes back to Stricker or somebody else who's going to be a more from 30,000 feet instead of 1,000-foot dude. Sorry, off my rant.
It's a valid rant. The anti Zach Johnson sentiment is strong, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere anytime soon. Because then, listen, if you put him in place next year, he's gonna overcorrect, right? He will overcorrect. He'll say, okay, here were my blunders, and then he's gonna go too far in the other direction to try to save face. I think, you know, new blood's required. All right, so, you know, we've had the picks. Let's move on to Rome.
Did you, real quick, what did you think about the Justin Rose segment, which was also very for the camera? You know, he's out in the backyard with his, you know, he's got his shirt tucked into his shorts and he's kicking the ball with his kid, but it was all very much for the cameras. But man, the Justin Rose story was so much more heartwarming than the Justin Thomas story. I felt those things were kind of, I don't know if the producers did it on purpose, but it really felt like I was rooting for Justin Rose, and I just, the Thomas thing, just with the dinner with Zach and are we all going to make the team and all that stuff. And I got a kiss butt to the Justin Rose thing when he's talking to Luke Donald. He genuinely seemed ecstatic, like a kid, like, this is the first time I've been picked. This means so much to me. I really bought into it. I bought into Justin Rose. I know he gets a lot of flack. What did you think of that?
I thought he was great. He seemed so down to earth throughout the whole process. He seemed genuinely nervous, but he also seemed like he genuinely wanted to get back into the fight to make amends for the mistakes he'd made in the past. He understood his role. He reminded me of the catcher in Major League, you know, the movie Major League.
Yeah. That's a good
I forget
comparison.
the guy's name.
Tom Berenger's character. Yeah.
Tom Berenger's character,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the old crusty veteran that's there to, you know, stabilize the ship, move forward, and then at the end of the movie he has the heroic, like, calls his shot to the bleachers and bunts in the game-winning run. So I loved it. I thought it was great. You know, I'm drinking my Pims, waiting for your call, playing some football in the garden.
You had that scene, and then like they kind of cut to Zach Johnson at his kid's high school football game getting like a sign at halftime, and you're just like so grossed out. Like, hey, we're naming the corridor after the Zach Johnson family, our Ryder Cup captain. I almost threw something at my TV that he was out there doing that.
How tough do you think that roster at St. Simon's Island is?
Oh, God. was so everything was all bad Americanism. It was so cringy.
It really was.
It was things that we despise about looking in the mirror at ourselves. Sometimes Netflix showed us right in our living rooms, in our face, in high definition.
Yep. So let's get to the playing, right? They show a little bit of the pomp and circumstance. I think we've touched on that before, specifically Jenna Sims, Mrs. Koepka. But
Man.
right out of the gate, yeah.
There was no let's be honest. That was a throw.
I'm
there
trying
was no
to
reason,
avoid it, Josh. I'm trying to
there was no
avoid it.
reason to show that except for one reason. You know what I'm saying? Like even the camera couldn't resist.
There was a lot of reasons to show it.
Yeah, we're gonna get in trouble. Let's move along.
What did you just think of, like the way that they start to segment into the actual playing of the tournament? What did you think of the approach? Because it seemed very, again, it's this really, day and night in terms of how the teams are now coming out there. And it was like USA as this, kind of bravado of, we're coming out, we're going to come out guns blazing. And it's like Europe just was silent assassins. They knew what they had to do, and boy, did they come out and do it.
I guess there's got to be, because I look at, I always root Team America, because I know last year you got on me for picking Europe because I don't support the troops, but I do because I am Team America. And at Whistling Straits 2 years ago, the crowd gets them fired up, they get behind it, but it was very evident watching them walk out for the opening ceremony and this stuff. Americans are trying to be cool, and the Europeans are there for business. And I think that works really well for them in Europe. I think that the fans respect that mentality, that workmanlike mentality, where American fans, they want to see Bryson hit 400-yard drives and pump his fists. And I just don't think Europeans, before or after the match is over, are into that stuff. Or during the match, they're pretty emotional, right? Rory pumps his fist, but before and after, they're all business. And I think if you watch that Friday morning, I got up, as you remember, really early, and I tweeted my way through that whole thing. Those dudes just looked on point mentally, even beyond their physical skills. And America just looked totally rattled. Like Sam Burns looked rattled that Friday morning match. Why he went out first, again, I'll never understand, taking a Ryder Cup rookie and like, okay, dude, here you're out first. Why? If you're going to pick, all right, I'm going to go on another rant. If you're going to pick JT and Jordan, and I feel like we should have done this last year, and I might have, why sit them in the first freaking match of the Ryder Cup in foreign soil? Why are you rolling three rookies out there in Sam Burns and I forget who else? There's two other rookies that were playing, Homa, and like, put your dogs out there. If you're going to pick them, if you're going to have the nuts to pick Spieth and Thomas and look in the camera and say Justin deserves to win this team, and then sit him in the very first match where you need to get out fast, and he's our leader, he's Captain America. Sorry, Pat Reed. No, nothing personal. Why sit him? Why put Sam Burns out there and Scotty Scheffler, who are fairly tepid dudes, to get boat raced, in that first match? It also felt very
penal to Brooks Koepka too. That was like
why sit Brooks Koepka?
We're gonna take you even though you're on live, but that felt like you're gonna start the game on the bench.
I'm playing Brooks Koepka every freaking match. It just made no sense, man. That dude's decisions made no sense. Zero. Yep. Okay, I'm sorry. You had a question. Yeah, and I had to say that. I was losing my mind on it, watching it again.
No, and I one of my favorite parts of these two episodes was, and again, I don't think Netflix does anything by coincidence. The chants that the American fans had over there sounded so pathetic. It was like, there's our captain. But you could tell it was like, and I know it's not on U.S. soil, but it sounded like it was three dudes that cashed out their 401ks to go to the Ryder Cup, and it sounded pathetic.
And that's about what it was. Meanwhile, the European fans, they're in Italy, they're all multilingual, and their English chants were great. Like the one, like, stand up if you're up by 4 points, or singing the Cranberry song, and like working in like, it was great. Like, man, home run all the way around.
When they started chanting "Zombie" by the Cranberries for Patrick Cantlay, I thought it was just incredible. It's all in your head. It's in your head. It was just great. So that's a good point. Let's kind of move into episode 8. There was not too much to kind of round out 7 there after the picks and the initial rounds, and I think 8 is where we start to get into kind of USA's rally, right? That's how they start off episode 8 is Zach Johnson's like, all right, we're not out of it. This is when adversity strikes. This is where you figure out who your guys are. And, I like playing from behind. Again, every stereotypical business quote you can find in a, Leadership for Dummies book, he starts rolling out, and it like out of the gate just goes south, which not surprising.
What let me ask this. I'm gonna do a non sequitur here, but I'm gonna bring it back to your question. There was a quote. Phil Mickelson was quoted in the Athletic today about Live and what they're trying to do in their strategic plan, and he said something I found really interesting. The National Football League is not dependent upon fans who have played football, right? Most of us haven't played football. I did play football in high school, but not much. And it's certainly not college or professionally. I don't play football now, but every Sunday and Saturday I'm watching football. There's a fan base well beyond those who participate in the sport. And Phil said, we're trying to reach, Live is, the golf fans who don't actually play the game. And that struck me, like, are there golf fans that don't play the game? Is there people who are watching golf on Sunday who don't play? I think that's wrong. And I bring that up because I think Netflix has a little bit of a conundrum. I think they're trying to find the fan, like maybe my wife or my daughter, who doesn't play the game but might be intrigued by some of these stories. Drive to Survive has accomplished this very, very well. Breakpoint less so on the Netflix side. But Mike, I guess throwing it back to you, is Netflix creating drama here with this comeback and to kind of appeal to those who may not be golf fans or golf savvy or don't play the game? I find it interesting that they manufactured some drama here on a Sunday where there really wasn't much. And the fact that golf feels like they can reach fans that don't play the game doesn't seem very realistic. I went very meta there on you.
So no, I don't. All right, two things. We'll touch on the Netflix meeting. I don't think they did. I think, listen, they didn't give Zach Johnson a script, right? Like Zach Johnson was out there preaching that his team had a chance, and I guess on paper they did have a chance, but the Netflix conundrum is this, and I think you hit the nail on the head. If you don't play golf, you're not going to watch golf. That's my opinion. It is a slow sport. It's a sport that if you don't play, you don't understand how hard it is.
Right.
How many people do we know that, go to the driving range or Top Golf and they think they're just going to crush the ball over the fence and then they almost fall off the top level because they can't hit the ball?
Well, there's video of it now.
I look at like NASCAR, right? Like the NASCAR Netflix show that came out right around the same time as Full Swing. NASCAR has seen, and this is a stat I heard today, last year, NASCAR had 4 races that eclipsed 4 million viewers. NASCAR's 5 races into the season, they've had 5 races with over 4 million viewers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's a sport that I think, listen, I know I'm never going to be able to drive a stock car. So I think people come to grips with that. Like we know we're never going to be able to be on an NFL football field, but we like seeing people do these kind of blunt force, manly things, right? And they get attached to these drivers and there's high stakes, and it's just very different than a golfer that's going and playing in the Masters, right? Like if you picked someone off the street that's never watched golf before and you plop them down next week and say you're going to watch 4 straight days of golf, they're going to want to claw their eyes out.
Right.
They don't understand any of the history. They don't understand the kind of how incredible it is to see those players on that course, how hard it is to get to that course as a fan. They're not going to appreciate it. All that to be said, getting back to your point on Phil, if that's Liv's goal, they're never going to accomplish.
They're never going to get there. But I do think Netflix may help bridge the gap a little bit. I think these digestible Full Swing episodes. No, right. My daughter's not going to sit down and watch the Masters. I think she may watch Full Swing again next year, and that may help her tap into the golf marketplace a little bit more. But to your point, she'll watch a football game. She's not going to watch a golf tournament. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect from the thinking like Phil might have that we're trying to appeal to the non-golfing fan really the non-golfing fan's going to buy into the way I have Drive to Survive. They're going to maybe buy into Full Swing, but they're not necessarily going to buy into sitting and watching tournament golf. And to your point, as big as we think golf is, NASCAR trumps them for most TV ratings, right? Like you mentioned, I think there are 4 million viewers for these races. I think the Players Championship, the number was under 4 million this year. It was 3.5 million watched the Sunday round of the Players Championship, which was a great round. It was a very good leaderboard, very dramatic finish, and yet NASCAR is outdrawing them. And the women's college basketball regional final between between Iowa and LSU, 12.5 million people. I mean, you're not getting that for anything outside of maybe a good Sunday Tiger Woods Masters, in golf. And so I think we're maybe I love golf fans, but I think we're overestimating how much they care. And I think Netflix is maybe can bend that number a little bit, but I don't know where my point is here. But
we're 2 seasons into Full Swing, and at not one point outside of Keegan Bradley have I felt really like, man, I can connect with that, or man, I feel bad for that guy. It's like Brooks Koepka's episode last year. It's like he's a tormented soul as he sits in his $12 million home with his supermodel wife with 4 major trophies sitting in his cabinet. It's like, it's not that bad. It's, oh, woe is me, is JT. Oh, by the way, here's my $10 million home, my smoking hot wife, my awesome doodle. Like, I'll be okay. Like, even in NASCAR, the Netflix show, like, these guys are all millionaires, but they're portrayed very differently. Like, you got a guy named Booty Baker who's in a wheelchair that just spits dip in a cup an entire race, and people think he's hilarious. They probably, don't want anything to do with the guy in real life, but he's a character. He's got an edge to him. These guys are dropping F-bombs. These guys are fighting each other in the pits. You're not going to have that in golf. Like, there's not a polarizing. The polarizing characters in golf are only polarizing because guys like you and me recognize that they are against the grain, and against the grain is like Patrick Cantlake didn't wear a hat, and it's like, oh my god.
Yeah, that's a good. I'm glad you brought that up.
He didn't wear a hat.
That's golf's version of something drama
bad boy
that Joe LaCava got within 10 feet of Rory while he was laying up a putt. Like, oh my God, shut it all down. And Shane Lowry screamed, tell him to get the F off the green. Like, that's nothing compared to a pit in a NASCAR race, or, there's not drama there. It looks like it is. And I told you my theory, and I'm going to stand by it. And I wish Cantlay had just come out and admitted this. The dude didn't wear a hat for one reason. He was getting married on Monday following the Ryder Cup, like literally. And his wife said, you are not going to have those dumbass hat tan lines for our wedding. I guarantee you she said that. And so dude's like, yes, ma'am, I'm not going to wear a hat. And that's why he did it. I wish he would come out and admitted it, because that's the reason he didn't wear a hat. I assure you it's not because I'm going to protest the United States not paying me. That is that's suicide to do something that with your sponsors. The guy was getting married, but we had to make it into some sort of drama, and some reporter threw something on Twitter. Next thing you know, 50,000 people are waving their hats at him. And, we have the scene on 18 on Saturday. Anyway, that's what
before let's get into the scene on 18 and what I thought was I thought the insight that we got from this show was vastly different than what the media portrayed. But how stupid. And man, I'm sorry, JT, that we pile on to you on this podcast, but man, do you open up the door for it. JT's comment of like, well, if Patrick can go out there and carry us without a hat on, I won't wear a hat on Sunday. It's like, dude, you're not in high school anymore where like your buddy broke his arm, and so you guys all go out there and like point to him in the stands and then, go play your football. And you're like, shut up, JT. Grow up. Like, it's such a stupid thing to do, to be like, solidarity, I'm not going to wear a hat. Like, how about you just go play your game?
How about JT? You wear a hat and keep the glare out of your eyes while you're trying to hit some pressure-filled shots and make putts. There's a reason we wear hats. It's not just to keep the sun like for burning our face. It's because sun glare interferes with your ability to like see and read greens, and like it's so dumb that we made that a thing. And again, if I'm Zach Johnson, I'm like, hey man, just shut up, or hey Patrick, put the hat on, or at least tell him why you're. It's a failure of leadership at a certain point. And that's where it goes back to with me. But to go back to your central point, I think Netflix did as good as they could do with what they were given to create drama. And I think it made for a really compelling season of television. And I really enjoyed it. I think they learned from their mistakes last year, which is pretty milquetoast, that season 1, other than the Kepka episode. And they gave us the episode 2 with Rory. They gave us, all the Zach Johnson foibles. They even gave us Tom Kim wandering through the champions locker room at Augusta. So I feel like they got it right more than they got it wrong this season.
Yeah, and I want to hit this point quick. The hat thing on the 18th green, when that broke on Twitter, SportsCenter, you would have thought that Lowry and McIlroy were telling LaCava like "F you, mother effer, POS, I'm going to fight you," and then you actually hear what's being said, and it was relatively amicable.
It's cordial, man.
Lowry was like, "Yeah, get off the green," and then afterwards, like Cava's apologizing, and they're like, "No, we actually thought it was kind of funny. Just like you might have stood there too long." Like, Justin Rose was like, "Yeah, I got a good chuckle out of it." It was like, no issue.
Well, it was the Rory video going off in the parking lot that kind of really put it into the national spotlight. That's where it started leading sports centers, when Rory got caught on film screaming at, Bones, who's trying to be an intermediary for this thing, because Rory was very hell-bent on finishing 5-0, and that putt, or at least not losing a match, and that putt that he missed cost him that opportunity. I think he felt some legacy points were taken from him, and he got mad about it. And but he also
there's your pit row versus the country club roundabout, right? Is
right.
Hey, you clipped me going 210 miles an hour into a wall, and hey, you stood in my line for a little longer than I really wanted you to.
You got within 10 feet of me while I was landing my putt, and I just couldn't focus. Like, it's so ridiculous. Yeah. It's embarrassing. I feel embarrassed to be a golfer. Also, where were the Netflix cameras for that? We had to depend on the stock footage. Like, wasn't Netflix out there, like, following Rory to his car after that? Like, let's see if Rory loses his shit going to the parking lot. Like, I would have loved to see it behind the scenes of what actually transpired there as Rory lost his mind. So they didn't get everything right.
And question for you. I've always heard this, like the team room. Is there like a physical team room?
Oh yeah. Like they have a space a locker room with all kinds of cool stuff. Yeah, for sure.
I guess Netflix didn't get access to that because we didn't see any of that. And that's where they say like, oh, the team room, the chemistry's off. Like I would have loved to have seen, when this whole Cantlay thing's going on, what's Koepka doing? Just sitting there in the corner on his phone.
That was a big story last year, Mike. If you don't remember that, Netflix actually petitioned the PGA of America to allow cameras into the team rooms. And the players on the American side said, no, we don't want them in there. We want to have that as a private space. And so that was actually a big news story. And Netflix lost that fight. And it really did remove the opportunity to see what you're exactly talking about. It's like, what did this look like behind closed doors? And what did Brooks Koepka say? Was eyes rolled back in his head like, this is just a bunch of, babies and panty waist playing this sport. I should have played baseball. I mean, that's what it would have looked like.
All right, let's end it on this because I know we'll have to edit some of this out. But
it's all staying. This has been beautiful work.
Do you agree with Ricky's explanation of why he conceded that putt?
Good. Let's finish on this. It's the way to go about it. I 100% think he is lying through his teeth to us, and because we've all been in this spot in match play. His opponent has a 3-footer to win the match, no matter what Ricky does, right? Ricky's got a 6-footer to force his opponent to miss that putt. So Ricky concedes the putt. You know why he does it? Because he'd much rather concede the putt than the whole world watch him miss that 6-footer and then concede it anyway. He didn't think he was going to make the 6-footer. I guarantee you, if he thinks he's going to make the 6-footer, you're making Tommy Fleetwood putt the 3-footer to win the Ryder Cup. That dude sat there in front of all those people and said, I can't make that putt. I'm going to concede it because I don't want to miss it and then concede anyway. I guarantee you, because we've all had that thought like, man, I'm just going to go ahead and concede that so I don't have to putt this 6-footer and just live with the outcome. That is it's a very dark dystopian view of Ricky's psyche, but I think that's what happened there. In fact, I'm convinced of it.
Yeah, I hated it. It was
awful. You make him putt.
His explanation, on paper is fair. That's a gimme on every other hole. What's different about it? And I couldn't, when he said what's different about that one, I go, it's for the Ryder Cup.
It's for the Ryder Cup. It's for the whole thing.
It's a very different thing. It was really disappointing. And he even said, he walked off the green after, he goes, I don't have it today. That was the first thing he said to his guy. He goes, I don't have it today. It's like, well, ugh, like just so it was the perfect finish to that U.S. team. It was anticlimactic. It was cowardly. It's a strong word, but that's what I felt like.
No, I felt that's exactly the word I used when I watched it live. I'm like, well, that was just cowardly. We just put our tails between our legs and said, well, we're going home. We're done.
Yeah, just a terrible way to end it. But a great season. It's been renewed. There'll be a season 3.
Yes. That's very exciting.
I'm excited to see who's going to participate in that. And I'm excited to see the format.
Will they participate? Will they see this and be like, I don't know, man. I don't need to be that exposed to risk. I think these guys are so risk averse. It's the nature of golf anyway. Are they going to allow themselves to be filmed, or we have to trust that we're going to we're going to have to Akshay Bhatia it next year because and Nick Dunlap, because these guys are going to say no.
Yeah, but who? All right, let's play that game. Who says no? Zach Johnson and JT probably.
JT
everybody
has to
else,
say no.
Everybody else had a pretty fair shake, right? And you can go back to some of those guys from seasons like Sahith Tagala didn't really get any screen time, and he was a polarizing character in scene 1 that everyone appreciated.
Yeah,
I think they can get more into the international stars, and maybe they go back to Live and say, everyone's warming up to Live. Everyone's warming up to it.
They're gonna. I don't know. Obviously, they're already under contract, probably filming this season already. So I'm sure they've already made those decisions, those editorial decisions. But I would not be shocked if they did not have more Live coverage next year, because I think Live wants the publicity. And frankly, let's be really honest, they're managed differently. So the Live Tour, the powers that be, who write the checks and make sure you show up for the tournaments, those guys don't miss events and those type of things. If they tell you you're going to be on TV for Netflix, you're going to be on TV for Netflix, whether you like it or not. Dustin Johnson, that's if Al Ramyan says we need publicity and all publicity is good publicity, and Netflix wants you on TV, you're going to be on TV. That's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm gonna write a piece for the website when it goes live of the top 5 people I want to see on next season.
I can't wait. Maybe you can lead with that. We're 2 months away from that going live, so I hope you have that one ready to go.
We'll be hitting the keys, getting it ready. All right, everyone. We've had a lot of fun recapping Full Swing this season. We hope you'd enjoyed listening, and we're excited for next season. So we'll catch you on Monday with what are we doing, Josh? Our official Masters preview.
Masters previews coming up, and we have a big lineup of stuff going on next week and launching the YouTube page. And this video, you and me talking about Full Swing, all 4 Full Swing recaps will be available to see our beautiful faces. And by the way, your face maybe looks more like Shane Lowry than Cam Young. After I saw the episode 8 rewatch it, I'm like, oh, he's more Shane Lowry than Cam Young. Yeah, sorry, buddy.
That's actually very, it's very disappointing.
I know. I'm sorry. I hated to have to tell you that, but I felt like I owed it to you.
Wow. Hell of an ending, Josh. Thanks, man.
You're welcome, brother. We'll see you next week, dude.
Later.